This message comes from Blue Harbor Entertainment with Audrey's Children, the untold true story of Dr. Audrey Evans, whose fight for change redefined medicine and impacted the lives of millions. Starring Natalie Dormer, now playing only in theaters. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. Indeed's sponsored jobs helps you stand out. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed and get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/NPR. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. Okay, y'all, today you and I are connecting the dots between Steve Harvey, a.k.a. Something Old, the latest season of Love is Blind, a.k.a. Something New, credit cards, a.k.a. Something Borrowed, and women's disappointment, a.k.a. Something Blue. I know. How are all of these things connected? Well, we are going to find out with Rachel Wolf. She's an economics reporter for the Wall Street Journal and author Minda Honey, who has written about power and relationships in Los Angeles Review of Books, The Washington Post, and in her memoir, The Heartbreak Years. Rachel, Minda, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much.
So just really quick, what do you think? In our year of 2025, is marriage in or is it out?
In. I'm an optimist.
Okay, Minda says in. What do you say, Rachel?
I would say out.
Okay, see, this is what I love. Point, counterpoint. Well, that question is more and more something that American women are asking themselves. This past week, Rachel published a report in the Wall Street Journal titled, American Women Are Giving Up on Marriage. And y'all, when I say I could not click that link fast enough, she's focusing here on heterosexual relationships and found that women are prioritizing other parts of life, like buying property, investing in their careers, and developing friendships because they're not finding what they're looking for in the dating pool. And the numbers back it up. Women are more educated, more liberal, and typically have a much lower opinion of single men than vice versa. And as a result, fewer and fewer women are choosing to march down the aisle. So what does it mean that men increasingly want to get married and women don't? And what consequences does this have beyond just having a bad date? So, to start off, what does it mean that American women are hitting a breaking point and aren't all that pressed to get married anymore? Minda, I'll hear from you on this first.
Okay, so let me explain my response to is marriage in or out? I feel like it's in because even though I am not married, it's not even currently on the horizon, it is something that I'm still hopeful for and aspire to. And I feel like I'm not necessarily single by choice, but single due to a lack of choices. And I do feel like more women would be getting married if we felt like there were suitable options for us to do so. But am I willing to get married at the expense of my happiness? Absolutely not. And the reality is that we're living through this cultural schism where we are receiving neither a husband nor a partner because it doesn't align with women's current expectations around equality within relationships. The emotional equality isn't there. And, per Rachel's research, the financial and educational equality is also absent.
Yeah. Rachel, talk to us about your research.
So we really are seeing that men are more satisfied with their options than women are. In a survey from the American Enterprise Institute, fully half of college-educated women blamed their singlehood largely on an inability to find someone who meets their expectations, whereas only a quarter of single men said the same. It's a really big gap.
Yeah.
And, it's not only younger women who are doing this, but I think that for younger people in particular who grew up with a little bit less stigma around remaining single, who had models of like really fabulous independent women, it's become almost a trend. We're seeing people touting their voiceovers and off the market status on TikTok, and we're really seeing a focus on self-improvement, friendship, the ability to find happiness on your own. It's no longer like, oh, you just can't get a man. Now there's real pride in creating an independent life and in not settling.
It's interesting that you bring up what young people are thinking about when it comes to dating and relationships. I mean, I think about some of the messages that I got as a young adult from, for instance, Steve Harvey. And look, I think Steve Harvey is very funny. I think he is the perfect host for Family Feud. But I don't know if he should have been giving dating advice in his book, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. He was definitely a part of a chorus of voices, but I don't know if that was necessarily the best resource.
Absolutely not. So many of the narratives and scripts that women were given around dating were not successful. They did not serve us. And so now, we're at an age, I just turned 40, where it's like, okay, what we were taught didn't work. So now I need to figure out what does work for me. And oftentimes women are kind of discovering that decentering romance and dating is what's working for us currently.
Now, marriage has long been considered an ideal to aspire to, especially for women, as it was historically a pathway to economic security. Rachel, I wonder, how did we get here then, where so many American women are like, about marriage?
It's the case that more and more women just really seem to be saying, you know what, I'm not getting what I am putting in to dating. Or as I saw somebody's responded on Reddit, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. One of my sources said it's the only thing you can put 10,000 hours into and end up right where you started. And so due to this combination of demographic shifts between men and women and just the fact that women are doing so well financially, they don't need it. And I think many of them do still want it, but they're not willing to settle for something that they think is just going to hold them back.
I love hearing your reporting on this, the statistics and the data, and almost sociological breakdown of what's going on, because it's something that I've heard anecdotally from friends and loved ones for a long time now.
The share of single women ages 18 to 40 who are single, and here we're defining single as neither married or cohabitating with a partner. That data doesn't look at whether somebody's actively dating or not. And so that number was 51.4% in 2023, which is up from only 41.8% in 2000. So that's just a huge, huge jump in only a couple of decades. And, that just has so many implications for how we live our lives.
Yeah. Part of the reason why, for many women, dating is just not working is because of this return of old school gender roles. Like, why are these old school gender roles making a resurgence in today's dating scene? And what's leading women to say, no, thank you?
So I think, it's not necessarily that there's this resurgence of old school dating mindset among men. I think it's more that the mindset is being challenged by women. My mother was 10 years old when the law was passed that women could access credit, so that we could get credit cards in our own name,
right,
mortgages in our own names. Before that, your father, your brother, your husband had to sign on your behalf. So we're a part of this first generation of women who were born with the right to credit. So you pair that with a college degree, and suddenly we have the financial and social capital to challenge these conservative mindsets and to not tolerate things that we don't want to be a feature in our lives, like this inequality within a relationship. And conversely, that means that the men of our generation, they're the first generation of men who are in a situation in which they are not automatically born into having the upper hand financially in a relationship with women. And so they're being challenged, and they're being vocal about having that assumed power challenged by us.
That is a big, big, big reframe. I think that idea that men of our generation are perhaps the first to grow up in a world where it's not assumed that they will have that kind of financial upper hand is a really important reframe.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I do think that the data shows us that men have moved further right, and that includes the idea that they are embracing more of these kind of traditional normative gender roles. And I think that there are lots of reasons that that's happening, but the way that it plays out in relationships is you have people like Alicia, who I spoke to, who was making 50% more than her partner, but he expected that if they got married and have kids, she would be the one to take a step back from her career, and she just wasn't willing to abide that. And in fact, even though she was living in DC, which is pretty liberal, she said that she had trouble finding a man who shared her vision of the future. And men's and women's political views just really have, in the past 4 years, moved so much further apart. And that makes dating really tricky because it's not just about who you voted for, it's how you live your life and your values.
It's like a whole value system.
Exactly.
Yeah. Coming up, what have you learned is driving this political gap between men and women?
So I do think that many young men are facing a very real crisis of purpose.
Stick around.
This message comes from Saatva. Saatva luxury mattresses are made in America by expert craftsmen using the highest quality materials so that your mattress will provide comfortable sleep for years and years. Saatva mattresses are always delivered to your home and set up in the room of your choice. They're never folded and never squeezed into a small box. Visit SAATVA.com/NPR, where NPR listeners save an additional $200.
This message comes from Betterment. When investing your money starts to feel like a second job, Betterment steps in with a little work-life balance. Their automated investing and savings app handles your money, constantly being diversified and optimized so you can focus on what matters most. Because your money doesn't need a work-life balance, you do. Make your money hustle with Betterment. Get started at Betterment.com. Investing involves risk. Performance not guaranteed.
This message comes from BetterHelp. Therapy can be expensive, but at BetterHelp, they believe therapy should feel accessible, not like a luxury, which is why they offer quality care at a price that makes sense and can help you with anything from anxiety to everyday stress. Your mental health is worth it, and now it's within reach. Visit BetterHelp.com/NPR to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/NPR.
This message comes from Warby Parker. If you wear glasses, you know how hard it is to find the perfect pair. But step into a Warby Parker store and you'll see it doesn't have to be. Find a Warby Parker store near you at warbyparker.com/retail.
I think for many people who are big reality TV fans like me, this came to a head in the most recent season of the Netflix show Love is Blind. On this season, there were several couples wherein the women and the men had serious foundational political differences, with the men being much more conservative and subscribing to those old school gender roles, or at least wanting to, and the women being more on the liberal end of things. This culminated in, people deciding not to marry each other when they finally got to their wedding decision day. And also a totally viral clip from one of the women who was on this season who decided to share the specifics of the differences that she had politically with her fiance from the show.
I still, to this day, don't really feel comfortable telling you Devin's views, but I will be really clear about mine.
Okay.
I 100% support the LGBTQ community. I also believe that women should have the decision to choose if they want to have an abortion or not. We got there emotionally, but ultimately, aligning our lives together was a big decision.
I think that's a very helpful kind of cultural hook to be able to talk about this widening political gap between men and women. I mean, that's often cited, as we discussed, as a reason behind a decline in dating and marriage. Rachel, in your reporting, what have you learned is driving this political gap between men and women?
So I do think that many young men are facing a very real crisis of purpose, and they feel like society doesn't need them. They feel like they don't belong. They are way less likely than women to just have anybody at all who they feel knows them well, to see anybody outside of their homes. You know, they've heard that they're the problem, that their masculinity is toxic. And so, you know, I think that they're looking for answers, and that's understandable in many ways. And we're seeing many of them defect from the Democratic Party en masse at the same time that women are much more likely to identify as liberal.
That's so interesting that you mentioned the Democrats, Rachel, because I do feel like in Tim Walz, there was this model of masculinity that was being embraced by young men, like this archetype of the coach.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. But I keep thinking back to the Tate brothers or other manosphere influencers who are really shaping right now how men perceive and treat women.
But the results of it isn't successful. Like, they are following the messaging and they are alone. When women realized that the advice of Steve Harvey was not working for us, we went out and we found a new script.
Right.
You know, at the same time, we've seen men's workforce participation rates lag, their earnings lag, and women are saying, you know what, I can afford financially to do the things that I want to do on my own, and so I'm not going to wait. In recent years, we've really just seen women thrive economically. Their workforce participation rates are way up. They're closing the wage gap, especially among single men and single women. There's almost no difference in their average wealth, and they're just not willing to settle for a man who isn't keeping up.
I'd like to also add that there's this emotional stagnation that seems harder to address than economic stagnation, where basically even if a man goes to therapy or, identifies as a feminist, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that he'll have enough empathy and know-how to meet the emotional needs that many women have in romantic relationships. So how do we go about addressing emotional stagnation without, making it a group project, aka something women have to fix?
I think that the economic and the emotional piece really go hand in hand. And if you don't feel like there are good jobs for you that you want to do, it's really hard to feel like you have anything to contribute to a partnership. And I think that women are waking up every day and seeing evidence that their life is going to be better than the lives of their mothers and grandmothers. Men are waking up every day and worried that their lives are going to be worse.
It makes me think back to, though, as we discussed, women seem to be kind of decentering romance from their lives and instead, focusing on their careers or pouring into their friendships, their family lives, or finding hobbies. I think that the idea that women have a habit, it seems, as a group, of finding other forms of fulfillment outside of career or outside of romantic love might be something that could be good for everybody. But that's just my 2 cents. Rachel, Minda, I have learned so much here. Thank you both so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. This was really great.
Thanks so much.
That was economics reporter Rachel Wolf and author Minda Honey. Minda's book, her own memoir, The Heartbreak Years, gets into a lot of the themes we touched on in this episode. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Corey Bridges.
This episode was edited by
Nina Pathak.
Our supervising producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from Bombas. Nearly 30% of marathoners end their race blistered. Bombas running socks are strategically cushioned to help say bye to blisters. Run to bombas.com/NPR and use code NPR for 20% off your first purchase.
This message comes from EasyCater, committed to helping organizations order and manage food for all their business needs. With online ordering from favorite restaurants, employee meal programs, and tools to see and control food spend at EasyCater.com. This message comes from PagerDuty. Your business is modern, so why aren't your operations? It's time for an operations intervention. Automate and accelerate critical work with the AI-powered operations platform. Learn more at pagerduty.com.